It has to do with the way that you receive information, intelligence information. Now, in your interview and previous testimony, it was said that the written documents were not necessarily a reflection of the information you received. And in fact, it's the verbal briefings that make up the main part of your briefings. Can you explain that to us? And can you generally explain to us the way you receive the information you need? Well, first of all, any prime minister receives countless briefings, receives countless information, not only on foreign interference or national security issues, but on the economy or public security issues, concerns shared by allies. I am constantly in receiving mode of all kinds of information from departments and advisors across government. I, of course, also follow the headlines to know what Canadians are reading about, hearing about, what they are concerned about in their daily lives. Now, all of this information is presented in different ways, but despite the fact that I receive written information, weekly summaries or briefs on intelligence, which are often on an FYI basis, the only sure way to make me aware of a priority issue is not simply to give me a note, which I may or may not read or may not have time to read if I am traveling or if I'm particularly busy at that point. It is the best way to convey information to me is to receive a direct briefing from my national security advisor, an intelligence advisor, who would give me security updates, usually on several topics, during a same session. And this would happen on a regular basis. Sometimes it's once or twice a week, or even more often if necessary. Sometimes it's only 3 or 4 times a month. It all depends. But the only way to guarantee, to make sure that I receive the necessary information is to give me an in-person briefing or over a secure line if necessary on any issue or priority issue.
What's been happening this week at the Judicial Commission of Inquiry into foreign interference in our elections is so shocking that if any of our so-called Five Eyes allies, that's sort of like the super friends of the democracy, the closest allies we have in the world, including the US and Australia and the UK, if any of our Five Eyes allies were still taking Canada seriously, that would absolutely be extinguished after watching Justin Trudeau's cavalier and I would say childish approach to national security. Like a child, he needed to be read to, like a bedtime story from Daddy. He wouldn't read memos. He insisted on them being read to him like a child. Maybe he is illiterate. I remember as a candidate, he said he had dysnumeria or some semi-made-up problem where he said he couldn't do math. Remember this?
I am dysnumeric. What that means is I have an inability to handle small numbers and little calculations, those easy things that people do so well.
Yeah, I think that maybe he's functionally illiterate as well. I think we actually do have the dumbest leader in the world. When he said to one of the inquiries that found him guilty of violating the Conflict of Interest Act, that he really left the details to other people and he was more into relationships and ceremony, maybe he was actually telling the truth. Joining us now via Skype is our friend Sheila Gunn Reid, our chief reporter, who has been covering very closely the cascading waterfall of embarrassment that has been this commission. Sheila, great to see you again.
Thanks for having me on the show, boss. Yeah, this commission today was not supposed to be a commission sitting day, but they had to clear up some things that were brought before the commission well after a major witness testified. But I think we'll get to that in a second.
Well, I mean, I've been reading your coverage, and I've also, because you've been live tweeting it and you've been clipping videos, and I very much encourage our viewers who are on Twitter to go to Sheila Gunn Reid. That's your handle on Twitter. And it's just one bombshell after another. I've also been reading the Twitter feed of Steve Chase, who's a senior reporter at the Globe and Mail. And I know I criticize the Globe and Mail a lot, but I have always mentioned Steve Chase as a genuine reporter who gets his facts right and who often presents challenges to the government. For example, he was part of the team, him and Bob Fife, who reported that Jody Wilson-Raybould was fired by Trudeau. Trudeau said that was false. No, Trudeau was just lying. Same sort of thing here. Steve Chase and Bob Fife reporting on Chinese government infiltration in Canada, Trudeau denying it. And so it's interesting to watch your coverage and the coverage of the mainstream media, at least in the case of Steve Chase. Everyone sees the emperor has no clothes. All right, enough preamble for me. Why don't you tell us some of the bombs that blew up today metaphorically?
Sure. So the reason there was basically an unscheduled emergency sitting of the commission, which was supposed to wrap up on Wednesday with Justin Trudeau's testimony, is that in the middle of the night, after the testimony of CSIS Director David Vigneault, documents relating to his testimony were given to the lawyers on the other side of the commission, the non-government lawyers, the intervening lawyers, in the middle of the night. So 1 o'clock in the morning, they raised this issue. They said, well, now we have these documents that say these wild things, and we need to be able to ask David Vigneault questions about it. And so we recalled David Vigneault, and a lot of those the questions today are relating to a briefing note from February 2023 that was given directly to Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, not the briefing note itself, but a briefing relating to this note and members of the PMO. And what that briefing note said, and it was from CSIS, it was a CSIS conclusion that said that China has been deceptively and clandestinely meddling in Canadian elections, specifically in the last two. And it said, we know, like we as an agency know this is happening. And so it's no wonder that the government didn't want those documents to be in the hands of the opposition lawyers when they were able to cross-examine David Vigneault. So Justin Trudeau was asked about those that briefing note, and he denied everything that was in the briefing note. And I think this is really interesting because PMO staffers had contemporaneous notes, their own handwritten notes from the day that they were given that briefing note, but they denied hearing about two very specific issues inside that briefing note. One, that CSIS knew, and thus CSIS communicated directly to the PMO and to Justin Trudeau that China had clandestinely meddled in the election, and that we are lagging behind our Five Eyes allies, and that Canada is a low-risk, higher-reward target for the PRC.
The briefing notes prepared for the director didn't particularly align with the actual briefing we got.
Yes.
The briefing was spent almost entirely on specific cases, and all of these notes prepared for the director, generally saying, yes, foreign interference is serious, India, China, serious, would have taken up the first 30 seconds of what the director said, because
Understood.
He would have gotten right into the cases. So this is not...
I'm just going to show you one more point from this. I do have your point about that. It's page 3.
It's going to be your last question.
Yes, thank you. Yes, it's the bullet point that begins with the word ultimately. Ultimately, state actors are able to conduct foreign interference successfully in Canada because there are no consequences, either legal or political. Foreign interference is therefore a low risk and high reward endeavor. Did the director convey in those words or in some similar words, that message that this is a low-risk, high-reward endeavor because there are no consequences?
No.
Thank you. That's very helpful.
That's Trudeau saying,
Yeah.
I'm too stupid to read my briefing notes, so I take them bedtime story style by having the director of CSIS read them to me like I'm an idiot child. And no, he didn't mention that. But you're saying documents were filed at 1 a.m. And they recalled the head of CSIS to contradict Trudeau. Is that what you're saying?
That's exactly what happened. So that is the briefing note from February 2023. CSIS director says those are the briefing notes of what would have been the briefing given to the Prime Minister's office. And as I said, they have contemporaneous handwritten notes relating to other things from that briefing that day. But they deny, Katie Telford herself denies that she was being told that. So the CSIS director was recalled this morning, and we've got a clip of him saying, actually, I did tell him.
Let's take a look.
Have you ever communicated this particular assessment about us being slower than our Five Eyes allies to either the Prime Minister or the Prime Minister's office?
Madam Commissioner, I can say with confidence that this is something that has been conveyed to the government, to ministers, the Prime Minister, using these words and other types of words. We often, in order to make sure we understand have the best possible assessment of a situation, we often look to other jurisdiction to see what is their own analysis of the threat, what tools they have put in place. And so the comparative analysis of with the Five Eyes, but also with other like-minded nations who have similar political systems as ours, or Western democracies. Doing the comparative analysis is a very useful tool, both from an intelligence point of view, but also from a policy point of view. So I can say with a high degree of confidence that these examples I've used them in both private briefings, but also in my speeches, public speeches, in CSIS annual reports, in parliamentary testimony. Just this past week, I was in testifying in front of the Canada-China Committee in the House of Commons, and I used same kind of analysis on different topics linked to foreign interference. So yes, to question to the council, this has been conveyed.
Thank you. And I take it your answer would be the same for the passage at page 3 about there being no consequences, legal or political, for state actors who conduct foreign interference. Have I got that right?
Yes, Madam Commissioner. I elaborated on that point with previous questions, answers, sorry. But yes, it is accurate to say that, I have said, use these expressions. And indeed, this one very specifically, low risk, high reward endeavor.
Thank you.
So Trudeau says, no. I was never told that Canada's easy pickings. No one ever read me the bedtime story.
Yep.
I mean, sure, I was given the memo, but I don't read that. I mean, come on, guys, I don't read that. And no, my bedtime story reader is less trustworthy than me. Trust me. The laziest prime minister in history, perhaps. I don't read memos because reading's for squares and I'm the cool guy. Trust me and believe me when I say, no, I didn't see that part. Or was he willfully blind, of course, because he was the beneficiary? I mean, it's one thing for China to rob us blind of our industrial secrets or intellectual property. They destroyed a company called Nortel, you might remember. Nortel. And that just benefits China. But in this case, the benefits to China were also benefits to Trudeau, namely defeating conservative candidates in ridings with a high Chinese-Canadian population. So, of course, Trudeau conveniently forgot or hid or redacted any criticism of what China was doing because he was the beneficiary of it. He's literally the Manchurian candidate.
Yeah, and he used accusations of racism repeatedly to shut everybody up about it. He was calling Chinese Canadians racist against Chinese people when they were raising questions about what was going on in their own communities. And actually, that lawyer there, Gib Van Aert, he's been a real joy to watch, by the way. He is Michael Chong's lawyer, and he, in Justin Trudeau's testimony, forced him to admit that reasonable questions about foreign interference and what China was doing within Canadian democracy, he forced him to admit that a reasonable person would not call that racism. However, Justin Trudeau repeatedly did it himself multiple times.
You know, I think China is obviously the greatest rival to the democratic West. I know that some in the military-industrial complex think Russia is, because they're, you know, getting to play with their weapons, and there's a hot war going on there, and it's a proxy war. Ukrainians are doing the dying, but the Pentagon is doing the planning and the strategizing, and the military-industrial complex is booming. I find that whole thing extremely tragic. But I do not think that Russia is the grave threat of the 21st century towards Canada. I think radical Islam is a threat, but the greatest persistent economic, military, cultural, geopolitical threat to the West is so obviously China. And Trudeau refuses to acknowledge that. He's on alert for Russian disinformation. They're on guard for the Russians. But in the meantime, he's accepting checks to the Trudeau Foundation from China. He's accepting bust-in voters from China, literally Chinese nationals getting on a bus and going to vote for his candidates. I think that Trudeau has disgraced himself, not just to the country, but if I were a leader of the Five Eyes, which, if I recall, are Canada, the United States, UK, Australia, and I can't remember if the fifth is France or New Zealand. Forgive me, I can't remember which of the fifth eye and the Five Eyes are. But certainly if I was in UK, Australia, or US, and I saw this, I would say, part of me would say, oh, we're safe because Trudeau's too stupid to read anything. So he's not going to leak our secrets. But I'd say I can't trust Canada with this buffoon as the leader. He's turning a blind eye to Chinese infiltration. He's on the other side of this battle. He's against us. I just don't know how any of our allies could take Trudeau seriously.
He denies being briefed by the CSIS director, his bedtime story reader. He's not a librarian, by the way. This is the top spy agent in the country. He's not Justin Trudeau's drag queen story hour reader. Justin Trudeau flatly denies being briefed that China had clandestinely and deceptively, those are the words used, foreign interfered in the 2019 and 2021 elections.
There we are. Yes. Director, it's the bullet point. We know that the PRC clandestinely and deceptively interfered in both the 2019 and 2021 general elections. Is this knowledge something that you or the service as a body have communicated to the Prime Minister or the Prime Minister's office?
Madam Commissioner, it is indeed something that has been communicated. I believe that I testified to that in where I said in our assessment we saw foreign interference in both the 2019 and 2021 elections. However, I concur with the result of the panel, the conclusion of the panel, that this interference did not amount to having had the impact on the general election. So I think it's important to understand that both statements, in my opinion, are true at the same time. We saw foreign interference during those elections, and that interference was indeed clandestine and deceptive. And at the same time, that interference did not amount to have an impact on the integrity of the election.
And if I may just finally follow up on this one point, if you're able to say, Director, and I appreciate you may not be, are you able to say whether the interference referred to in this bullet is limited to Don Valley North in 2019 and Steveston or Richmond East in 2021, or whether it's broader?
I think, Madam Commissioner, the best way to answer the question is refer back to the summary that the government has published in through the Commission as made public regarding the specific information on the 11 candidates and 13 staff members.
Understood. Thank you, Commissioner.
Sheila, what's another video? I mean, I've been following your tweets, and the reason I mentioned Steve Chase is because I'm thinking, is this getting outside of the skeptical conservative media space? I mean, just like the mainstream media is in its own little world, sometimes we have our own echo chamber. Is this news getting to other people who aren't in our circle? And I think maybe it is. What do you think?
I think this is international news. Even just as I was preparing for this interview, I wanted to see what was being said about what I saw this morning in testimony. And it's in the BBC, it's in Reuters. This is international news that our Prime Minister was informed about foreign interference, despite the fact that he says that he wasn't. And he is directly attempting, I think, to undermine our CSIS director, who says that he personally informed Justin Trudeau orally, because that's how he takes his briefings. It's really an astounding thing. He is attempting to throw our security apparatus under the bus, because that's the only way out of this, is that it's not us accepting foreign interference. It's them not telling us about it.
You know, forgive me this digression, but you made me think of this scene in The Office, you know, that comedy, where someone is explaining something to Michael, and Michael says, explain it to me like I'm 5. So the guy explains it to him and says, and then the next year. And so Michael says, so now I'm 6. It's just here, take a look at this clip.
We have a surplus of $4,300.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
We have to spend that by the end of the day, or it will be deducted from next year's budget.
Why don't you explain this to me like I'm 5?
Your mommy and daddy give you $10 to open up a lemonade stand. So you go out and you buy cups and you buy lemons and you buy sugar. And now you find out that it only costs you $9.
Oh.
So you have an extra $1.
Yeah.
So you can give that $1 back to mommy and daddy. But guess what? Next summer,
I'll be 6.
and you ask them for money, they're going to give you $9 because that's what they think it costs to run the stand. So what you want to do is spend that $1 on something now, so that your parents think that it costs $10 to run the lemonade stand.
So the $1's a surplus. This is a surplus.
We have to spend that $4,300 by the end of the day, or it'll be deducted from next year's budget.
Woo.
We should spend this money on a new copier, which we desperately need.
Okay, break it down in terms of, okay. I think I'm getting you.
That's Justin Trudeau. He wants to be so very serious. He wants to be a player. He wants to be a decider. He wants to be more than just a mascot. He wants to be the Prime Minister. But he's like a child. And I think it's sort of crazy how he's embraced that. Like, he's not pretending that he's read it. He's trying to make that into a virtue. No,
That's his defense.
Yeah. But in a way, he's telling us exactly who he is. It reminds me of when that conflict of interest commissioner asked Trudeau, why were you taking $100,000, $200,000 free vacation from the Aga Khan? And he said, well, because I don't really get into any details. If they were trying to bribe me, I wouldn't even know what they're talking about. I'm too stupid. Other people handle the details. I'm just into the relationships. He was serious when he said, I don't think about monetary policy. He was serious when he says he leaves the tough stuff to other people. He is serious. He is like a 5 or 6 year old child. And it's incredible that, I mean, yes, Steve Chase is writing up a storm about this, but if this were a conservative prime minister, or if this were Donald Trump, or if this were, like, there would be immediate and widespread calls for his resignation, or if we were in such a system, an impeachment. This is deeply embarrassing that is the head of our government.